Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com.
I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna Ellis, and tonight on Jenna Ellis Tonight, we've got a great show for you. Legal analyst Josh Hammer is going to be analyzing all of the landmark Supreme Court decisions that came down this week, a couple of more still to come, including presidential immunity. There was an absolutely critical decision on the fate of J6 defendants that could be a very big win for Donald Trump in his upcoming trial. We have Democratic strategist Robin Biro and Claremont Fellow Institute David Reaboi with us to unpack last night's very unusual debate. I thought a terrible night for Joe Biden, a great night for Donald Trump. And we're going to answer that all-important question. Will this election be decided in the ballot box or on the golf course? Tune in tonight. We've got a great show for you. Looking forward to being with you. Welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna Ellis on a beautiful Friday afternoon here in South Florida. You know, only a few things happened over the last couple of days. We had the debate last night, going to be talking a lot about that. But the Supreme Court handed down some landmark decisions over the last few days. And here to discuss it all and analyze it and summarize it is my good friend, host of the Josh Hammer Show and senior counsel for the Article 3 Project, Josh Hammer. Josh, great to see you.
John, always good to see you, my friend.
So, Josh, we saw Murthy v. Missouri, the censorship decision be handed down a couple of days ago. And I was one of the conservatives who was disappointed because to me, and I want you to get into the legal nuances of this, good, bad, otherwise, as a layperson looking at it from the inside out, all this said to me was that if the Biden administration or any heavy-handed administration doesn't like what you're saying on social media, even if it's fact-based, even if it's backstopped by decades of scientific evidence, all the White House has to do is give a call over to Meta or X or Instagram or YouTube, and they can silence you for dissenting speech they don't like. That's my layperson opinion, 30,000 feet. Unpack this for us. Tell us what this decision really means.
Well, that's basically it, John. And you basically hit the nail on the head there. I mean, this was a sprawling censorship industrial complex was the term that I and some others have been using to describe what was going on with the Biden administration. And what happened was, as a result of this litigation, due to discovery and also due to FOIA, we saw an incredible evidentiary trail here where you had all these .gov email addresses, people from DHS, HHS, various other Biden administration agencies and edifices were in constant communication, weekly, biweekly emails, regular phone calls with Mark Zuckerberg and his team at Facebook and Meta, with Jack Dorsey in the previous Twitter regime. And they were coordinating how to censor. And they weren't doing it particularly subtly. I mean, they were basically saying, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you don't do what we're telling you, if you don't algorithmically, de-amplify accounts that are spreading quote unquote misinformation when it comes to COVID-19 masking or vaccine, if you don't do that, if you don't suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story, maybe you'll lose your Section 230 immunity, or maybe you will feel the wrath of antitrust enforcers. And you can't do that, John, because there's actually long Supreme Court precedent on this front. There's actually a 1973 case called Norwood versus Harrison, where the court said that it is, quote, axiomatic. It is self-evident. It's axiomatic that the government may not induce private actors to do that which the government cannot do itself. Now, they dismissed this case ultimately on standing, which it's devastating because you're not going to be able to get an evidentiary trail like this, even if you can somehow find another plaintiff that satisfies Amy Coney Barrett's very idiosyncratic standards for standing. You're probably not going to get enough evidence that builds up to actually reach a good outcome on the actual First Amendment merits. So what it means in the short term, unfortunately, is that social media can probably get away with coordinating with the Biden administration to censor us, which is pretty bad stuff.
Yeah, but talk to me about standing for a bit, Josh, because that's where I got into it online with a few people. Again, my layperson opinion view of this. Why wouldn't anyone who's ever used one of these platforms have standing? In other words, if I'm on the platform, even if I've never had a debate about COVID or vaccines or whatever it may be, I've never had a controversial debate, but I gleaned information from those who had, and I got bad information. I don't care if it's about which kind of vehicle to buy. Somebody told me to buy this vehicle and it turned out to be a lemon. Why is it that not anyone who's ever been on social media, who's gleaned information, who may or may not have acted on it, why wouldn't they have standing here?
Well, it's a good argument, right? I mean, because even if you were just a consumer of social media, then you should have the First Amendment works in multiple ways. You don't just have a right to speak, you have a right to listen as well. And if you want to go to the public square, and social media is our modern day public square, then you basically have the reciprocal First Amendment right to freely listen to others in an uncensored way. So I do like that argument, but we didn't even have to get there, because you had people like Jay Bhattacharya, the heroic doctor out at Stanford Medical School. He clearly, we know in the evidentiary record, John, that Jay Bhattacharya was algorithmically deranked. He was temporarily booted off Twitter at times. Right. We know that he should have gotten in here, but again, the court takes a very, very narrow view of standing here, which they're not internally consistent on their own terms. By the way, the liberals traditionally on the court, the liberals.
Josh, let me ask you this, not to interrupt you, because our discussions are always fascinating, and I could sit here with you for 2 hours and discuss this. But it's sort of why I asked my last question in such a rudimentary way. So if a guy like Jay Bhattacharya, who was directly affected by this, a Stanford University professor, a medical school professor, if a guy like that doesn't have standing, whoever would? I guess that's my question.
I don't know. Now, the way that Amy Coney Barrett formulates standing in the opinion in Murthy is it's not just that you have to have a wrong done to you, but you have to basically demonstrate that the court is needed to step in right now to prevent future harm from happening. And even if you can establish the former, I guess what they're saying is that it is dubious whether or not you can establish the latter. I find that ridiculous. I find that absolutely ludicrous, frankly, when it comes to actual standing doctrine there. They should have easily gone into court on this claim there. And, again, even if they can somehow find some new plaintiff to get back in there, I don't think that the evidentiary trail is going to be there, because the social media companies, John, have now been covering their tracks since this litigation started. They're not going to have all of this in writing.
So let's talk about Barrett for a second, ACB. She was disappointing in the Fisher decision as well, the one affecting J6 defendants. And so that case is basically, the crux of that is the charge of, I believe it's obstruction of an official proceeding, which I didn't realize until I read the analyses this morning. That was intended to be used in a very limited scope. It was a byproduct of the Enron case and was really designed to prevent evidence, the tampering of physical evidence. It was never intended to be used in this case. Is that correct?
Yep, that's exactly correct. So this comes from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which, as you said, was the post-Enron accounting law that Congress passed. Now, John, I'll nerd out here legally just for a second. There's an old venerable doctrine of statutory and constitutional interpretation called ratio legis, is the Latin term. It comes from Sir William Blackstone, who kind of popularized this. And what it means is the reason of the law. What is the reason that this law came into being? You can only do textualism to an extent. Yes, we need to look specifically at what the words mean, but you also have to know what is the overarching purpose of the broader statute in which these specific words are embedded. You can't be hyper-literalist. You have to understand the context in which Congress drafted the statute. And when you bear that in mind, the prosecutor's decision to use this Enron accounting scandal contextualized law to try to shoehorn these prosecutions that may, on a very literalist interpretation, bear some resemblance, but actually really have nothing whatsoever to do with what this law had any intended effect to do. It's a total misappropriation of the law, which with huge ramifications, by the way, also for Donald Trump, because 2 of his 4 charges in Washington, D.C. with the Jack Smith special counsel indictment actually pertain to this very statute, John.
All right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Josh. So what does this mean in practical terms? What does this mean for the convicted J6 defendants, anybody who might face prosecution? But ultimately, and most importantly, what does this mean for Donald Trump and his federal J6 case?
Well, for the J6ers themselves, I think it means that a lot of prosecutions are either going to be tossed out or they're going to have to issue some superseding indictments to the extent that's not double jeopardy, or possibly just reduce some sentences in the back end. But it is very, very good news for essentially every J6er who has been charged with this particular statute. And on a similar note, I think it means, unless I'm misreading what's happening here, I think it probably means that 2 of the 4 charges against Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. are essentially null and void at this point. So it's a devastating outcome for Jack Smith. He does still have these 2 other charges. We'll see what happens with the Trump immunity case on Monday. Obviously, that will have ramifications for that particular prosecution as well. But it's a good day for the J6ers. It's a good day for Donald Trump. And it's a really brutal, devastating outcome for Jack Smith because yet another of his legal theories has been tossed out now.
Well, the administrative state took another blow in the Chevron case. Josh, unpack that one for us. Explain what that means. It's a bit more complex.
Yeah, so this has been a white whale of the Federal Society Conservative Legal Movement for decades. And certainly ever since I started law school in 2013, this has been one of the most discussed doctrines to overturn. It has been a longstanding bugaboo for conservatives and libertarian lawyers alike. So basically, there was a case from the 1980s called Chevron, which came about in the era of judicial restraint. And the flip side of judicial restraint, unfortunately, sometimes takes the effect of emboldening or engorging other actors, in this case, the administrative state. So what Chevron deference basically held was that when an agency is interpreting its own operating statutes, like let's say the EPA, for example, when they're interpreting some greenhouse gas emission statute, if their interpretation is reasonable and if Congress drafted the statute ambiguously, then the judges can't do anything. Their hands are totally tied. The agency's interpretation naturally rules the roost. Now, this has had the effect of arrogating large swaths of power to the administrative state because they obviously interpret these statutes in their own favor, as any deep state bureaucratic actor would do. So Chevron doctrine, it may have been well-intentioned. It did not work. And it was also a gross violation of the separation of powers because we all recall from Chief Justice John Marshall in Marbury versus Madison from 1803, he famously said, quote, that it is emphatically the province of the judiciary to say what the law is, not the province of the deep state, the province of the judiciary. That's literally all this opinion says. It is a good recalibration of the separation of powers, and it's a good day for liberty, frankly, as well.
I'm smiling because I love when you say things like, as we all recall. You can cite case law like nobody ever met. No, I don't recall those things. That's why you're my go-to guy. All right, in the 30 seconds we have left, Josh, clairvoyance from Josh Hammer. Which way do you think the justices go on presidential immunity? Because that's the big one we've all been waiting for. Last 30 seconds to you.
Yeah, it is the big one. I think it's going to be a Solomonic split the baby kind of thing. They're not going to give a full victory for Donald Trump. They're not going to give a full victory for Jack Smith. They will say some acts get you immunity after presidency, some acts do not. Then they will get back to the lower courts who then apply that test to the facts of this case. But that's going to take a lot of time. So again, it's going to be a loss for Jack Smith to that extent.
Josh Hammer, my go-to legal analyst. You can check Josh's show out, The Josh Hammer Show, and catch him on Twitter, or X now, at Josh Hammer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna. Back with us now is Josh Hammer, host of The Josh Hammer Show and senior counsel of the Article 3 Project. Before the break, we were talking about the presidential immunity case, the one all eyes are on. And Josh, give us a quick recap, a 30-second recap of which way you think that's going to go. We were a bit rushed into break, but I think it's important for the audience to, well, let me say this. Josh is typically spot on. I think we chat pretty much every day, and out of the hundreds of cases that have popped up in lesser courts and the Supreme Court, I think Josh has been maybe incorrect once or twice. He's typically a great predictor of the way these things are going to go. So this presidential immunity case is the big one, Josh. We only had about 30 seconds before the break. Why don't you delve into that a little bit deeper and tell us how you think it's going to go and why?
Well, John, you're very kind. I mean, first of all, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I get a lot of predictions wrong when it comes to the court, so I guess we'll see whether I'm right on this one. But you know, most lawyers that I speak to on the Trump immunity case tend to have a similar prediction, which is both extremes are ultimately going to get rejected. So Donald Trump's lawyers have made, as lawyers have to do, they have to, by definition, take the kind of most extreme argument. You know, they have made the argument that there is complete and total immunity for any former president after his presidency, that is what Article 2, the executive vesting clause of Article 2 requires. Then Jack Smith has taken the extreme argument on the other hand, that you can prosecute a president for anything whatsoever. Democrats, I think, John, would actually rue the day that became reality. I mean, let's take, for example, Barack Obama in 2011. He assassinated Anwar al-Awlaki, the al-Qaeda operative who happened to be a U.S. citizen. Well, what might happen if, civil liberties folks, after Obama was president, then prosecuted him for homicide, right? I mean, that would actually be a viable theory of prosecution under Jack Smith's theory of the case here. So they're probably going to reject both of these arguments. They're going to say that some acts that a president takes that implicate a core constitutional Article 2 power, so commander-in-chief clause, military powers, war powers, firing and hiring of personnel, cabinet officials, the appointments clause, that's core Article 2 presidential power stuff. On the other hand, if it is a purely personal act, and John, I think you'll get a smile out of this, but the example that I like to give is, let's say the president finds out that his wife is having an affair, and then he wants to go hire a hitman deep in the bowels of the internet to take out the guy who's shacking up with his wife. That probably is not going to be covered under any kind of Article 2 constitutional immunity. So it's going to be something along those lines, and then it will get kicked down to the lower court to apply that test for the facts of this particular case.
Hillary might have tried that one out. So the truth might have been stranger than fiction, Josh. Let's talk about, look, we had this debate last night and we're going to do a lot of analysis. We're going to be discussing that ad nauseum on the show. But Biden's performance was that of an incapacitated man. It was almost sad. I mean, if I could feel compassion for Joe Biden, I would actually feel bad for the man for what his family and his handlers are doing to him. We know that. America saw that. The world saw that. Our enemies saw that. But we hear a lot of talk about the 25th Amendment, and most Americans understand what it is at a high level. But delve into the legal issues of the 25th Amendment. What is required if it were to get to some place that extreme? If it were to go to a place where the people around Biden said he's completely incapacitated, this is now a grave national security threat, the man can no longer perform the duties of office. What happens in the White House? What are the legal mechanisms, the procedural mechanisms around the 25th Amendment, Josh?
Well, there's really not a whole lot of precedent for this, to be honest with you. I mean, the 25th Amendment has, it's a relatively new amendment. It's been around for about a half century or so, and it has not actually been ever formally or technically invoked. Certainly there are times in American history where we've actually kind of informally done a 25th Amendment. So Woodrow Wilson actually comes to mind. Towards the end of Woodrow Wilson's presidency, he was not running the show. His wife was actually doing so. And that was not particularly subtle at the time. But, now we do have this formal mechanism in place where you need kind of the vice president and you need cabinet officials involved there. And I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, John, for the very simple reason that I don't think Democrats are going to coup their own guy unless their own guy agrees to be couped. So I'm not necessarily optimistic that this is going to happen, but it's a very good thing for people to be talking about. I wrote a column 2 years ago now in July 2022, very simply titled "Resign Joe," where I said that this guy, and this was a year and a half into his presidency, I said not only has his track record, even at that point, been catastrophic, inflation, the recession in the economy, the Afghanistan withdrawal, his record was terrible, but he clearly has just lost approximately 5,000 steps even since 2020 when he ran his basement campaign during COVID for the presidency. So, look, Kamala Harris is terrible. She is absolutely appalling. But at this point, at least for purposes of trying to deter Xi Jinping from just scooping up Taiwan tomorrow, it's ridiculous to say that Kamala Harris could deter that, but at this point, she probably could do so better than the current guy, at least.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to get there. I think the Dems are boxed into a corner. I don't think they thought his deterioration was going to be as rapid as it's been or as obvious as it's been. I got to tell you, Josh, people have to be kicking themselves in the White House today for allowing that to occur last night. And now you've got this situation where the Fisher case we spoke about in the last segment, that's been not overturned, but the courts ruled that these J6 defendants didn't, in fact, violate this statute, that the application of the statute was unconstitutional and inappropriate. You've got a president falling apart. The nation's going to go into disarray. I don't think there's really any mechanism in place to stop any of this. And that's a pretty terrifying place to be because, like you say, I don't think for 1 second the Democrats would ever allow Kamala to ascend to the presidency, even for 35 minutes. I don't see that ever happening. And you correctly note, our enemies would love that. I mean, she's not going to deter anything. If anything, they're going to be on a fast track to take Taiwan, to move further into Ukraine, to just engage in nefarious behavior around the world. But right now, there's really no legal mechanism to save this country, is there?
I mean, the 25th Amendment is the provision that is in place for that, or impeachment. I mean, or impeachment, but you can't necessarily.
Well, that's not going to. We know that's not going to happen with the Senate makeup.
Yeah. We know. We know that's not going to happen. You also just can't impeach someone because he's old and senile. I mean, that's not really the impeachment criterion there either. So the 25th Amendment actually is the appropriate mechanism. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it's a perfectly viable talking point, and I think Republicans are smart to talk about it. But at this point, John. At this point, unless Jill Biden, and I really do fault the wife here a lot, by the way, because the wife is the one who's letting her spouse be humiliated in front of the entire world.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah.
I mean, she's the Lady Macbeth kind of figure here, the one who's holding on to the reins of power at all costs there. So unless they can somehow convince the guy at the top to step down, I think it's basically a free-for-all on the world stage until at least November and arguably until January 2025. It's really terrifying stuff.
Yeah, I had put this out on X, formerly Twitter, and I say it all the time. Joe Biden will never allow Joe Biden to release the delegates. That woman loves power. She loves the trappings of the office. And if she's going to lose all that, she's going to go down fighting. She's not going to walk away from it. I just don't see it.
No, she's not going to. I mean, Lady Macbeth, honestly, is the analogy that comes to mind there. But to your point, John, about how Democrats in the White House have to be kicking themselves to let their guy get up there like that, they really do. I mean, I saw some liberal commentator, it might have been Chris Cillizza, the newsletter guy at Politico, or Washington Post, wherever he is. I think I saw him tweet last night, Biden should not have agreed to do this. He would have gotten some flack for not agreeing to debate, but simply not showing up would have been orders of magnitude better than what he put up there on the national stage last night.
Yeah, I reposted that myself. I think he was spot on. Josh, it is always a pleasure. Thanks so much. I'm always legally smarter after I spend a couple of minutes with you. Great to see you, my friend.
You too, John.
More in-depth debate coverage with our panel, Dave Reaboi and Robin Biro, right after this. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna Ellis. That was a debate and a half last night, wasn't it? I mean, I don't even know where to begin. So I'm going to unpack this with two good friends of mine, Democratic strategist Robin Biro and fellow at the Claremont Institute, David Reaboi. Guys, I don't even know where to begin. Reaboi and I are on a text group, so we were that was a bit active last night, as I'll say. Robin, though, I've got to start with you. You and I have been analyzing stuff on air. I think I said it in one of our last segments with Jenna since 2017. So we've been doing this 7 years together, going on 8 years. I'm sure we'll be doing this for many more. But you've always been one of the most pragmatic analysts I know. I'm not even going to say one of the most pragmatic Democratic analysts I know, one of the most pragmatic analysts I know. And I was thinking of you last night because you're a friend, and I just felt bad for you, Robin. I felt bad for you and the other pragmatic Democrats out there.
It was very painful. Last night was a super painful night for all Democrats and Americans across the nation. It was just very difficult to watch. And look, we're used to being a little bit nervous when Joe Biden speaks because of his well-known stutter, but that's not what we saw last night. What we saw last night was what our friends on the right have been cautioning us about for months now, that he's advanced in age, and there is definitely some cognitive decline there that we need to be concerned about. But oh my goodness, I mean, what a night.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Dave in just a second. But Robin, let me ask you this: what do you think? Yeah. You've been on the inside. You were on the inside of the Obama machine. You know how these things work. What do you think the conversations are in the White House this morning? Because it cannot be a pleasant day in that building this morning and this afternoon, this evening, and I expect for the next few weeks. So what do you think is happening over there right now?
They're all in freak out mode. I'm friends with lots of Biden staff, and they're all shouldering the weight of the nation coming down on them. And this is surely happening in the White House too. If this is happening in our Georgia campaign offices, We just got a mass text from Joe Biden calling this all malarkey, that he's never seen so much malarkey, but that's not going to stem the tide of what's coming. The Trump campaign would be smart to just let this play out and then bask in the glory of this epic fail of ours for a few days. And surely somebody is having a conversation with Joe. Is your heart really in this? Are you sure you want to do this? Because he's frankly the only one who can kind of pull the plug. We've had the Democratic conventions in 3/4 of the states across the country. So the only person who can really change the direction right now is Joe Biden himself, with maybe some direction from Jill Biden.
Yeah, I think she's calling the shots. Dave, you spent many years in D.C. You travel there often. You're looped in to the D.C. intelligentsia, the political set. You speak to Republicans and Democrats alike, even though you're one of the furthest right guys I know. What are you hearing from people on the ground, people you know, people you trust on the other side of the aisle?
Yeah, I mean, folks in D.C. have been telling me not just now, but for months. I mean, look, the point is that everyone knows someone in their family who has gotten, who has gotten old and shows signs of kind of acute mental decline. That's fine, but not everyone has a massive White House staff of hundreds of people and hundreds of people that interface with him and interact with him and see him every day in this obviously enfeebled condition. And I think it's an absolute scandal that they have managed to keep a lid on this for this long. I mean, when you over the last couple of years, when you see the clips and you see him out in public, it gets very hard to deny this. But you've had a Praetorian Guard in the media and also in the White House staff that has just lined up and refused to admit what is going on. I mean, it's almost like
I think it's
almost
tragic.
like a comedy.
Dave, we got to go to break. We're going to bring both Dave and Robin back they're going to be with us 2 more segments. We have a lot to unpack about this debate. Stay tuned. Be right back. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo, in for Jenna Ellis, continuing our post-debate analysis with our post-debate analysis panel, Democratic strategist Robin Biro and Claremont Institute fellow Dave Reaboi. Dave, let me start with you, because you and I were in a bit of disagreement on a text chain with friends this morning and late last night. You're of the school of thought that the Democrats will replace Biden, or you're strongly leaning that way. I'm of the school of thought that, yeah, they'd like to, but they don't have a mechanism in place to do so. And it's pretty much impossible to bypass Kamala. Add to that, as I said to Josh Hammer earlier in the show, I don't think Jill Biden would ever allow Joe Biden to give up the delegates. She loves the trappings of power too much. But again, you've been pretty adamant, Dave, for a while that they're going to at least try to replace him. How? With whom? And how will they bypass Kamala Harris?
Right. Well, I usually make my predictions based on what I think, based on like the vector between what they're capable of and what their rhetoric is and what they really believe. So based on the last several years, it's obvious to me that they think that Donald Trump is a massive threat to democracy. I saw the Washington Post editorial today. You don't need me to tell you that they believe this. The Washington Post editorial today, I thought was kind of really on point, and they made this case, and they said the stakes are too high to possibly take a chance with the chance that Donald Trump will be elected. And I think we have to assume that they believe at least 50% of the things that they say about how horrible Trump is. And if that's the case, then here's what they're staring down at now. They're looking at a totally enfeebled, unmasked president who nobody really thinks is fit to serve another 4 years after he may win in November. I mean, nobody thinks he's going to serve out his term. He's just, he's not, he's not fully there at this point, much less in another 4 years. And then anyway, they've got another problem, because what happens then? They're going to have the same succession fight in the Democratic Party now, or 4 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever. So I think they're going to do it now because the stakes are very high. And I've made this prediction for a long time because the fundamentals of this situation have been the same for years. It's not a surprise. Everybody in the White House, everybody in top Democratic leadership, from Barack Obama down to the janitor at the White House, knows that this guy is out of it. And and by the same token, they also know that Kamala Harris is a complete disaster. She's got such a high staff turnover. She's as popular as she's unbelievably unpopular. She's completely incoherent. Frankly, she's not very bright and can't take direction from her staff, and on and on. So the people who are really smart in the Democratic Party, and there are many of them, as strategists, have been looking at this situation, going in slow motion for the last couple of years now, at least for the last 2 years, where they know that this is coming. They need to get ahead of it. And my thinking was that something like this was bound to happen. You saw the media this morning and last night, and especially over the course of the last couple of months, they're kind of slowly stepping in this direction, in the kind of Biden must go. It's too important for the country. So they've been going on this narrative, and I just think it's an obvious thing to do, is to switch out this old, befuddled, mentally enfeebled guy with someone who is younger, could possibly serve 2 terms, and let's face it, someone who can take advantage of the fact that the Republican Party is in disarray. We only think Trump has only been doing well because
Dave, let me jump to Robin, because here's where I will agree with you. So Robin, last night after the debate, I needed a little comic relief, so I switched over to MSNBC and CNN, because I thought what I was going to get was a series of canned, coordinated talking points that were being rushed out the door by the White House, but I didn't get that. What I got was a wake. What I got was a funeral procession. I saw Joy-Ann Reid admitting that Joe Biden, she said Joe Biden, I'll paraphrase her, but she said Joe Biden's job was to reassure Democrats that he could do the job. He didn't do that. And she said Democrats are in a panic. She said maybe it's not a horrible panic, I'm paraphrasing, or the worst level of panic, however she said it. She said, but it's definitely a panic. So here's the only point where there's daylight between me and me feeling that they won't remove Biden, is that there were not coordinated talking points. And now you've got the staunchest defenders of Democrats, Obama, Biden, the Joy-Ann Reids, the Rachel Maddows, out there admitting Biden can't do the job. How does the Democratic machine, Robin, how do they work around that?
There really is no workaround, and there is not a contingency plan. The last time that I had personal interaction one-on-one with Joe Biden was 12 years ago, in 2012, and that was not the same. That is not the same Joe Biden that we saw last night. I've just got to be honest, intellectually honest. So the party, we really are in freak out mode. And to your point about Dr. Jill Biden not wanting to relinquish power, there's always been talk about Michelle Obama stepping in as a possible candidate. I would like to throw out there that Jill Biden is quite a bit younger than Joe Biden. She's 73 to his 81 years. And I've been to rallies recently that she hosted herself. I could see them possibly throwing her out there as a last-minute replacement. It's been done in gubernatorial races in Texas, actually, in the past. So there is some precedent to this. But I mean, we are in full-blown panic mode. Last night was our absolute worst-case scenario. It was an unmitigated disaster. Now, sure, Biden found his stride about halfway through and delivered some good points, but we're in the media. You and I are in the media, and you know that 75% of this is looking good and talking good, and he did neither of those things. So what people will come away with as an impression is that he was a disaster, even though he did deliver some cogent points. The takeaway, and I'm glad, frankly, for the intellectual honesty of people like Joy-Ann Reid. I saw that very same clip that you did, and I was glad to see Van Jones say the same thing, that this is a disaster, our worst case scenario.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I was Van Jones. He was full bore. I mean, he was full throated. Look, we need a new candidate. You know, I was remiss here. I should have had the producers pull the clip of the Biden's appearance at the watch party after the debate. And somebody had tweeted out or posted out on X this morning something to the effect that they had the video of Jill Biden talking to Joe, and it said something like, "My kindergarten teacher congratulating me when I lost." And I could not believe that I was watching the First Lady of the United States speak to the President of the United States. Yay, you knew all the answers and you answered all the questions. I mean, she had an elementary school teacher's tenor and cadence in her voice, like she was talking to someone who was either a child, and I mean like an younger elementary school, 4, 5, 6, nursery to elementary school, or a seriously cognitively deficient adult. Dave, you saw the clip. I mean, have you ever seen anything like that publicly from a first lady to a president? We have a minute left, Dave.
No, it was wild. It was just wild. I mean, I had multiple people last night texting me, keep the memes coming. Because this debate last night was just rife for memeing. I mean, I think we're way beyond. His performance last night was way beyond the point where you could come out and reasonably say, "Oh no, it was fine." This is just spin. This is Republican. This is Republican spin and dirty tricks and whatever. This is obviously a great big mess. And in all seriousness, too, the world is watching. And
we got to go to break. But when we come back, we're going to get into this much deeper, and we're going to figure out if this election is not going to be decided at the ballot box, but on the golf course. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna. Back with me now, Democratic strategist Robin Biro and Claremont Institute fellow Dave Reaboi. Guys, is there anything more 2024 than two wealthy old white guys arguing about their golf handicaps in a presidential debate? Watch this.
I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf with you if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie, that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to turn.
Let's not act like.
Guys, I can't even watch that with a straight face. I mean, I've seen your swing. Then he said you can't hit the ball 50 feet. What in the world? Are we going to decide this election on the golf course, Robin?
Let's do it. Let's shake things up and decide this. I just want to, by all means, get him out there. Let's have a round of golf. Give this some levity. But no, all seriousness, like what in the heck were we watching last night? That was the strangest exchange. And like you said, it's two rich old white guys talking about their golf handicaps on what's supposed to be a presidential debate that was tuned in by the entire world. Really, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's funny, Dave. I'm watching that and I'm saying to myself right now, there's some single mom on a bus stop going to her second job, and these guys are talking about their golf handicaps. Dave, you're one of the most critical analysts I know. What do you think? Do you think Biden ever had a 6 handicap?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never played a round of golf in my life, so I'm the wrong person to ask about that. Look, let's just give props to Donald Trump, who said, let's stop acting like children here. That was a surprise, frankly, because he likes to to go and kind of play around in this kind of thing. This is exactly on Trump's turf. And I mean, look, obviously it's completely asinine and ridiculous, but you had to have thought that, I mean, what made Biden come up with this? He walked right into one of Donald Trump's traps. I mean, this is where he feels comfortable.
I
and
think
then
he
the
brought it up
comeuppance.
because I think he brought it up because earlier in the debate, when they were talking about physical and cognitive fitness, Trump referenced how he won a couple of club championships and they weren't senior championships, and that it takes mental and physical acuity to do that and stamina to do that. And I think Biden sort of delayed response at the end was like, oh, I have a 6 handicap. I can play golf as well. It was a very weird moment for the president of the United States. I mean, Rob, wouldn't you agree? Wasn't that just a weird segue for the president in a critical presidential debate?
It was one of the most awkward moments. And my kids like to use the word cringe. I've got a tween and a teen. And that was peak cringe. Let's be real, peak cringe. And look, props to Joe Biden for trying to deliver the line about, I'll do it if you carry your own bag. Do you think you can do that? But my gosh, Joe Biden's delivery all night long was cringe. And frankly, it struck terror in the hearts of Democrats and probably a lot of Republicans as well. So, but yes, peak cringe, John.
Dave, in about a minute and a half we have left, if you're working in the White House, if you're in the White House comm shop today, what are you advising Team Biden to do? And I'll ask you this as well. If you're in Trump's comm shop, what are you advising Trump to do going forward after that disaster for Biden last night?
Look, I mean, that's a good question. If I was in White House comms, there's the old saying is when you have nothing good to say, don't say anything. And sort of see if you can just wait through the mess and wait until the next media cycle or 3 media cycles from now until it all comes down. So that's what I suspect that they're going to do. I suspect right now they're just burning up the phones, trying to get prominent allies, trying to get something, some kind of media campaign together where people will, Schumer, Pelosi, or whoever, the grand poobahs of the party will appear and say, no, Biden's fine, Biden's fine. I also expect them to run out and try to put up a video or do something, try to make up for last night in some way. I don't know how that would be possible, but I think that's what they're going to do. As far as what the Trump campaign is going to do is, I mean, I thought the ad that they put out last night, or the video they put out last night, which is a supercut of Biden being rambling and incoherent and senile. I thought that was great.
I agree, gentlemen. Gentlemen, we are out of time. Dave, Robin, thanks very much. I'll end the show by saying I think Donald Trump had the best performance of his political career last night, and I hope he stays on this track. If he does, he'll win in a landslide. Thank you very much. Jenna will be back with you Monday. It's been a pleasure to be here. Have a great weekend.